Darren called it family emergency access, our joint account, the one Mom set up before the dementia took her. He had the credentials. He had the security answers. He had every digital key he needed. What he didn't have was the knowledge that I'd been logging every transaction for 6 months, watching him siphon our inheritance like a slow bleed. In corporate terms, I'd call it controlled failure analysis, letting a compromised system run just long enough to document the breach. The break room coffee machine was dripping its last drops when Darren walked in. The machine was a Keurig, institutional model, the kind that takes those oversized pods and sounds like a diesel engine when it brews. I was standing there with my mug, the white ceramic one with the hairline crack running from rim to handle, waiting for the drip to finish. 2:47 in the afternoon. I know because I just glanced at my watch, the Casio with the resin band that had molded itself to the shape of my wrist over 23 years of wear. The watch face was scratched but the numbers still glowed green when you pressed the button in the dark. That mattered. Things that worked mattered. My half-brother didn't understand that. He understood acquisition, not maintenance. He understood taking, not keeping. The door to the break room swung open and he filled the frame. 6'1", thick in the shoulders but soft in the middle, wearing a suit that looked expensive from a distance but up close you could see the polyester sheen, the way it didn't breathe, the way it trapped his sweat. His tie hung crooked. It always hung crooked. Our mother used to fix it for him every morning before school until he was 16 years old, and even then he never learned to do it himself. He had that look on his face, the one that meant he wanted something and had already convinced himself he deserved it. His phone was in his hand, an iPhone with a cracked screen protector he'd never bothered to replace. Lazy. Sloppy. He tapped the screen twice and turned it toward me like he was showing me proof of something righteous. I could see the bank app. Chase. The joint account. The one ending in 4782. The balance sat there in black numbers against the white screen. $94,316.22. Linda from accounts receivable was at the small table by the window eating yogurt from a plastic cup. Marcus from IT stood at the vending machine deciding between chips and pretzels. Sarah, the new compliance hire whose last name I hadn't bothered to learn yet, was microwaving something that smelled like burned cheese. 3 witnesses. Darren knew exactly what he was doing. We need to talk about Mom's account, he said. Not hello. Not how are you. Just the demand, dressed up as concern. There's a family emergency. The facility called this morning. They need equipment upgrades for her wing. Monitoring systems. Safety rails. You know how bad her dementia's gotten. I nodded. Slow. The nod of an old man processing information he didn't want to hear. Mom had been at Riverside Memory Care for 14 months. $8,400 a month. I paid half from my salary at the defense contractor where I'd worked for 32 years processing regulatory compliance. Darren paid half from the joint account, which meant he paid with Mom's money, not his own. The account had been set up when she got the diagnosis, funded with the sale of her house in Baltimore. $180,000. Money meant to keep her comfortable and leave something for both of us when she passed. Except the balance didn't match what it should have been. Not even close. They're saying $47,000 for the equipment package, Darren continued. His voice had that practice tone, the one he used at his car lot when he was moving someone toward a sale they didn't want. I already talked to the administrator. If we don't move fast, they'll bump her to a lower-tier wing. Worse care. You don't want that. He tapped his screen again. The transfer page loaded. From Joint Checking 4782. To Darren Holloway Personal. Amount field showed $47,000 in crisp black digits. I'll handle the facility payment from my account, he said. Easier for their accounting. Simpler for taxes. You understand. The room had gone quiet. Linda had stopped eating. Marcus had given up on the vending machine. Sarah's microwave beeped but she didn't move to open it. They were all watching me. Watching the old man in the faded Oxford shirt and the khakis with the worn knees. Watching Nate Holloway, 58 years old, the quiet one who never made waves, never raised his voice, never pushed back. Whatever you think is best, I said. My voice came out exactly how I needed it to. Tired. Hollow. Defeated. The voice of a man with no fight left. Darren's face relaxed. His shoulders dropped half an inch. He smiled, not warm, not brotherly, but satisfied. Victorious. Thanks for being reasonable, Nate. Family has to stick together. That's what Mom would want. He tapped the confirm button. The transfer processed in less than 2 seconds. $47,000 moved from the joint account into his personal account with a soft electronic chime. Just like that. Gone. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and walked out without another word. The door swung shut behind him. The break room stayed silent for maybe 8 seconds. Then Linda said something sympathetic that my brain didn't bother processing. I lifted my mug from the Keurig drip tray, the coffee inside it lukewarm now, and walked back to my cubicle. Cubicle 14B. Third row from the windows. Beige fabric walls that had faded to the color of old paper. A desk made of laminate would print it to look like oak but fooling nobody. My computer monitor sat dead center, the screen dimmed to reduce the fluorescent glare that triggered headaches if I stared too long. To the left of my keyboard was a framed photo of Mom from before the dementia, back when her eyes still tracked movement and recognized faces. To the right was a coffee-stained mouse pad that had been here longer than I had. I sat down. The chair creaked. It always creaked. The pneumatic cylinder was dying and the seat tilted slightly left, but I'd learned to compensate. I opened my personal laptop, the Dell that lived in my desk drawer, the one IT didn't manage because it wasn't connected to the company network. I navigated through folders. Property Tax Archive 2019. Inside that, depreciation tables. Inside that, a file called Schedule K Backup. The spreadsheet opened. 6 months of data. Every transaction Darren had made from the joint account. Every withdrawal. Every transfer. Every fabricated invoice and every lie about where the money went. I scrolled to the bottom and added a new row. Date, today. Amount, $47,000. Category, transfer to personal account. Notes, false claim regarding facility equipment upgrade, public witnesses present at workplace. I saved the file to 3 locations. Laptop hard drive. Encrypted USB stick in my drawer. Private cloud account registered to an email address Darren didn't know existed. The documentation was complete. The evidence was multiplying. I'd been watching him steal since March. 6 months of what we called in my profession controlled failure analysis. You let a compromised system continue operating just long enough to document the full scope of the breach. Shut it down too early and you only catch partial evidence. Wait too long and the damage becomes irreparable. I was waiting for the right moment. The moment when the evidence was so overwhelming that no lawyer could argue mistake or misunderstanding. The moment when the pattern was undeniable. My throat was tight. My jaw ached from clenching. The muscles in my shoulders had turned to wire. But my face stayed blank. My breathing stayed even. I closed the laptop and slid it back into the drawer. On my desk was the compliance report I'd been working on before Darren arrived. Section 7, Subsection 12, Material Discrepancies in Contractor Billing. I opened it and continued reading where I'd left off. The words blurred slightly. My hands wanted to shake but I kept them still, fingers resting on the keyboard, waiting for the tremor to pass. It did. It always did. I'd learned a long time ago that anger was just energy looking for direction. Let it burn without focus and it consumes you. Channel it into process and procedure and it becomes something useful. Something surgical. Darren thought he'd won. Darren thought the old man in the break room with the cracked coffee mug and the stooped shoulders had rolled over one more time. Let him think that. Let him get comfortable. Let him take more. Because every transaction was another count. Another line in the spreadsheet. Another brick in the case I was building. I worked until 5:30. Shut down my computer. Packed my laptop into my shoulder bag, the canvas one with the frayed strap. Walked out through the lobby where Patricia sat at reception, the woman who'd worked the front desk for 16 years and knew everyone's name and everyone's routine. She smiled at me the way she always did. I nodded back. Outside, the parking lot was half empty. My car sat in the same spot I'd parked it every weekday for the last 9 years. Slot 87. A 2011 Honda Accord with 193,000 miles on it and a dent in the rear bumper from when someone backed into me at the grocery store 3 years ago. The car was silver, or had been. Now. It was more like gray, the paint oxidized from sitting in the sun. But the engine was sound. The transmission was sound. I maintained it. Oil changes every 5,000 miles. Tire rotations. Brake inspections. The things that mattered. I got in and the seat wrapped around me like an old coat. The steering wheel was worn smooth where my hands gripped it. I started the engine and it caught on the first turn. Reliable. I drove home. 11 miles. Surface streets, not highway. Past the strip malls and the fast food chains and the storage facilities with their orange roll-up doors. The sun was low and orange, turning everything the color of rust. My apartment complex came into view. Parkview Terrace. Built in the 70s. Beige stucco. Cracked asphalt parking lot. No park. No view. Just a name someone thought sounded better than what it was. Cheap housing for people who needed cheap housing. I'd lived here for 9 years. Unit 212. Second floor. 1 bedroom. 1 bathroom. A kitchen the size of a closet. $1,240 a month including water but not electric. I climbed the exterior stairs, the metal kind with the diamond tread pattern, and unlocked my door. Inside smelled like nothing. No cooking smells. No air freshener. Just the faint mustiness of a place that didn't get enough airflow. I dropped my bag on the folding card table that served as my dining table / desk / everything table. Walked to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. The light inside flickered, buzzed, then held. I pulled out a container of leftover pasta from 2 nights ago. Ate it cold, standing at the counter. My jaw was still tight. The muscles in my neck felt like rebar. I needed to relax them before the headache started. I walked to the bathroom and ran the shower hot. Stood under it until the water heater gave out and the temperature dropped. Got out. Dried off with a towel that had gone scratchy from too many washes. Put on sweatpants and a t-shirt. Sat on my couch, the sagging 2-seater I'd bought used from a Craigslist ad 7 years ago for $80. Turned on the television. Local news. Traffic accidents. Weather. A political scandal I didn't care about. I turned it off. The silence in the apartment was thick. I could hear the refrigerator humming. I could hear a couple arguing in the unit below me. I could hear my own breathing. Darren had stolen $47,000 today. In front of witnesses. Using a fabricated emergency. That brought his total to $130,400 over 6 months. Systematic. Calculated. Documented. I pulled out my phone. Opened the Notes app. Typed a single line. Public confrontation at workplace, 3 witnesses, demonstrated consciousness of guilt through preemptive narrative control. Saved it. Put the phone down. Leaned back into the couch and stared at the ceiling. There was a water stain up there shaped like a kidney. I'd stared at it so many times I'd memorized every edge. My brother thought I was weak. My brother thought silence meant surrender. He was wrong. Silence meant I was listening. Watching. Waiting. Building. The kitchen table was metal, not wood. Folding legs that locked into place with a click. Walmart clearance, $38, bought when I first moved into this apartment 9 years ago. The surface was fake wood grain printed on particle board, bubbled now where I'd set hot coffee mugs without coasters. It wobbled if you leaned on the left side. I'd learned not to lean on the left side. On the table sat my laptop and a cardboard box. The box was a banker's box, the kind with the built-in handles and the lift-off lid. I'd written on the side in black Sharpie, "Mom, estate documents." The letters had bled slightly into the cardboard fiber, giving them a fuzzy edge. Inside were the real records. The ones that mattered. I pulled out the accordion folder first. Manila. 12 pockets, labeled A through L. Pocket A held the joint account opening documents from 2019. The year Mom got the diagnosis. Early onset dementia, the doctor had called it, though she was 71, so not that early. But the word early made it sound more tragic, more urgent, so that's what everyone said. Early onset. Like it mattered when it started. It ended the same way regardless. She'd sold her house in Baltimore to fund her care. The house she'd lived in for 43 years. 3-bedroom colonial with the green shutters and the maple tree in the front yard that dropped helicopters every spring. The sale cleared $180,000 after the realtor took her cut and the bank took what was left on the mortgage. Mom had wanted to split it between Darren and me right then. Give us each $90,000 and be done with it. But Darren had convinced her, no, we should put it in a joint account. That way we could both access it to pay for her care. That way it would be fair. Equal responsibility. Equal authority. I'd agreed because it made sense. Because I trusted him. Because he was family. The account paperwork showed both our names. Nate Holloway. Darren Holloway. Either party authorized to withdraw without consent of the other. That clause was highlighted in yellow. I'd done that 6 months ago when I started building the case. I pulled out the transaction register I'd printed from the bank website. 47 pages. Every deposit, every withdrawal, every transfer since the account opened. I'd annotated it with a red pen. Legitimate expenses in one column. Fraudulent expenses in another. The legitimate column was short. Monthly facility payments. $8,400. 14 months of payments. $117,600 total. Add in some legitimate medical copays and pharmacy costs. Maybe another $3,000. Total legitimate spending, $120,600. The account should have had $59,400 remaining. Instead it had $2,916.22. The difference was $56,483.78. Gone. Stolen. Every penny documented in my spreadsheet with dates, amounts, and the lies Darren had told to justify each transfer. I opened my laptop and pulled up the master file. The spreadsheet had grown to 8 tabs now. Tab 1, Transaction Log. Tab 2, Cross-reference with facility invoices. Tab 3, Phone records showing when Darren called with his fabricated emergencies. Tab 4, Text message screenshots. Tab 5, Witness statements I documented from people who'd overheard his lies. Tab 6, Timeline analysis showing the pattern of theft. Tab 7, Legal statutes he'd violated. Tab 8, Contact information for law enforcement and regulatory agencies. The file was 234 kilobytes. Small. Efficient. Devastating. I scrolled through Tab 7. The legal research I'd done at night using free legal databases. Wire fraud, 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Elder financial abuse, State Penal Code Section 368. Theft by deception. Misappropriation of jointly held funds through fraudulent misrepresentation. Each statute listed with the elements required for prosecution and the specific evidence I'd gathered that satisfied each element. This wasn't anger. This wasn't revenge. This was documentation. This was what I'd done for 32 years at work. When a contractor overbilled, I built the case. When a subcontractor submitted fraudulent timesheets, I documented it. When someone tried to game the system, I let them, and I recorded everything, and then I sent my report to the Defense Contract Audit Agency and watched them get debarred. I was good at it. Patient. Thorough. Invisible until the moment I wasn't. My hands were steady now. The tremor from earlier had passed. My jaw had loosened. The tightness in my shoulders had migrated down into my lower back where it sat like a stone, dull and heavy but manageable. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memos app. Found the recording from 3 weeks ago. Pressed play. Darren's voice came through the tiny speaker. Tinny but clear. Nate, it's me. Listen, the facility called. Mom had a fall. They need safety equipment installed in her bathroom. Grab bars, non-slip mats, the whole setup. It's $23,000. I need you to approve the transfer today. It's urgent. The message went on for another minute. More urgency. More pressure. More fabricated crisis. I'd called Riverside Memory Care the same day. Spoke to Patricia Vance, the administrator. Asked about Mom's condition. Asked about any recent falls. Patricia had sounded confused. No falls, Mr. Holloway. Your mother's mobility is actually quite stable. She uses a walker but she's steady with it. We have all the safety equipment already installed. It's standard for memory care patients. I'd thanked her and hung up. Then I'd added the recording and the confirmation of the lie to my evidence file. That was the pattern. Darren would call or text with an emergency. I'd verify the emergency was false. I'd let the transfer go through anyway. I'd document everything. $23,000 for safety equipment that didn't exist. $31,000 for legal fees that were never billed. $18,000 for facility therapy programs that were never offered. Each lie bigger. Each theft bolder. Why had I let it happen? The question sat in my chest like indigestion. Why watch your own brother steal from your dying mother and do nothing? The answer was simple, but it took me months to admit it. I'd been conditioned. 40 years of being the reliable one. The one who fixed problems. The one who absorbed damage so other people didn't have to. When Dad died 15 years ago, I'd arranged everything. Funeral home. Cemetery plot. Obituary. Death certificates. Nobody asked me to. I just did it because someone had to and I was capable. When Darren's second marriage collapsed 10 years ago, he'd called me at 2 a.m. crying about legal fees. I'd sent him $15,000. He never paid it back. Never mentioned it again. I never asked. When Mom started showing signs of memory loss, I'd researched facilities. I'd visited 7 of them. I'd created a spreadsheet comparing costs and care quality and location. I'd made the decision and handled the paperwork and set up the payment system. Darren had shown up to help her move in. That was his contribution. Showing up. I'd mistaken competence for obligation. I'd mistaken helpfulness for duty. I'd mistaken silence for peace. But 6 months ago something had shifted. Darren had made the first fake emergency call. The one about facility equipment upgrades that didn't exist. $22,000. I'd felt the familiar weight of it, the expectation that I'd just absorb it, just let it go, just keep the peace. And I'd almost done that. Almost. But then I'd hung up the phone and looked around my apartment. The cracked linoleum in the kitchen. The water stain on the ceiling. The couch. With the broken spring in the middle cushion. I'd lived here for 9 years making $73,000 a year and living like I made 40 because I was always helping someone. Always fixing someone else's problem. Always being reliable. And it hit me. The realization was physical, like something breaking loose in my chest. I was 58 years old. I had no savings. No retirement beyond a mediocre 401k. No property. No assets. I'd given everything away. To family who took it and never said thank you. Who expected it. Who felt entitled to it. Darren wasn't asking for help. He was taking what he thought belonged to him. And if I said nothing, if I did nothing, he'd take everything and I'd end up old and broke and nobody would care because I'd taught them not to care. I'd taught them I was a resource to be used. That was the moment. That was when I opened the spreadsheet and started documenting. Not because I hated him. Not because I wanted revenge. Because I wanted to survive. Because I was tired of being competent for everyone but myself. I closed the laptop and stood up. My knees cracked. They always cracked. I walked to the kitchen and filled a glass with tap water. Drank it standing at the sink. The water tasted like metal and chlorine. The pipes in this building were old. Everything in this building was old. I looked out the window above the sink. The view was the parking lot. Cracked asphalt. Faded yellow lines. A dumpster that never quite got emptied on time, so it always smelled like rot. Darren lived in a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs. 2-car garage. Granite countertops. A backyard with a fire pit. He drove a Lexus that he leased for $600 a month. He took his family to the beach every summer. He had things. I had this apartment. This view. This cracked glass in my hand. The difference was I'd earned what I had. He'd stolen what he had. And the theft was about to stop. I walked back to the table and pulled out the last document from the banker's box. The form from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. FinCEN. Form 3949A. Information referral. I'd printed it 3 weeks ago. It sat in the box waiting for the right moment. The form was 4 pages. It asked for detailed information about suspected financial crimes. Identity of the suspect. Nature of the fraud. Documentary evidence. Timeline. Amounts. I'd filled it out by hand in blue ink. Neat block letters. Every field completed. Every question answered. Attached to it was a 16-page supplemental document I'd written. A narrative explanation of the fraud with citations to specific evidence items. Bank records. Phone recordings. Facility invoices showing no additional charges. Text messages. Witness statements. I'd organized it the way I organized compliance reports at work. Executive summary. Detailed findings. Supporting documentation. Conclusion. The conclusion was 1 paragraph. The evidence demonstrates systematic financial exploitation of a vulnerable elder by a family member with joint account access. The fraud has occurred over 6 months with increasing frequency and amount. Total estimated theft is $130,400. The suspect demonstrates consciousness of guilt through false justifications and public narrative manipulation. Prosecution is warranted under federal wire fraud statutes and state elder abuse statutes. Immediate account freeze recommended to prevent further loss. I read it again. The words were cold. Professional. Exactly right. I'd spent 3 decades writing reports that triggered investigations, audits, contract terminations, debarments. I knew the language. I knew what regulators needed to see. I knew how to build a case that couldn't be defended against. This was that. This was airtight. The only question was timing. When to file. When to trigger the collapse. I could have filed weeks ago. The evidence was sufficient. But I'd waited. Let him take more. Let him get comfortable. Let him make the mistake of thinking he was safe. Today's theft in the break room with witnesses was perfect. It showed escalation. It showed boldness. It showed he'd gone from secret theft to public manipulation. That mattered. That showed intent. That showed he knew what he was doing and did it anyway. I looked at the form. At my handwriting. At the neat rows of information that would destroy my brother's life. My chest felt hollow. Not empty. Hollow. Like something had been scooped out and the space filled with cold air. I didn't hate him. That surprised me. I thought I would. Thought I should. But what I felt was more like disappointment. Sadness maybe. The way you feel when something you tried to save dies anyway. We'd been close once. When we were kids. When Dad was still alive and Mom was still sharp. We played in the backyard. Built forts. Rode bikes. Normal brother things. But somewhere along the way he'd learned that taking was easier than earning. That manipulation was easier than work. That people like me, people who fix things, could be exploited forever. He'd learned wrong. I put the form back in the box. Not yet. Not quite yet. I wanted him to take more. I wanted the total to be so obscene that no lawyer could argue mistake. I wanted the pattern so clear that even a lazy prosecutor couldn't miss it. Another month maybe. Let him drain the account down to nothing. Let him think he'd gotten away with it. Then I'd file. Then I'd trigger the federal response. Then I'd watch the system I understood better than he ever could crush him the way it was designed to crush people who gamed it. I closed the banker's box and put it back on the floor next to the table. Checked my watch. 9:37 at night. My lower back still ached. I needed to stretch. Needed to move. I dropped to the floor and did 20 push-ups. My form was bad. My arms shook. But I finished. Stood up. Did 20 squats. My knees popped on every rep. Finished. Walked to the bathroom. Brushed my teeth with the electric toothbrush that was supposed to last 2 weeks on a charge but now only lasted 4 days because the battery was dying. Spit. Rinsed. Looked at myself in the mirror. 58 years old. Gray in my hair. Lines around my eyes. Thinner than I used to be. Harder looking. The face of a man who'd stopped pretending. I turned off the light and went to bed. The mattress was too soft. It sagged in the middle. I'd been meaning to replace it for 3 years but never did because it still worked well enough and I was always helping someone else with their emergencies. I lay there in the dark. The couple below me had stopped arguing. Now I could hear a television through the wall. Canned laughter. Some sitcom I didn't recognize. My mind ran through the checklist. Evidence secured. Documentation complete. Filing timeline established. Witness statements recorded. Procedural requirements satisfied. All systems ready. I felt nothing. No excitement. No anxiety. Just the quiet satisfaction of a job done correctly. A system about to execute its function. Darren thought he was clever. Darren thought he'd found an exploit. What he'd actually done was trigger an audit. And audits, when conducted properly, always ended the same way. With corrective action. With consequences. With the system restored to its intended function. I closed my eyes. Sleep came slowly but it came. Tomorrow I'd go back to work. I'd process compliance reports. I'd be quiet Nate in cubicle 14B. And I'd wait for my brother to steal again. Because he would. They always did. Thursday morning the call came at 9:17. My desk phone. The Cisco with the cracked plastic handset that sat in its cradle like a fossil from another era. I picked it up on the third ring. Let it ring twice because answering too fast looked eager and eager wasn't the mask I needed. Nate, it's me. Darren's voice. Background noise. Road hum. Engine. He was in his car. Listen, I need another transfer. The facility called again. Mom's gotten worse. They want to move her to intensive monitoring. Higher level of care. It's urgent. How much? I said. My voice flat. Tired. 23,000. I already talked to them. They need it by end of business today or they'll put her on a waiting list. Could be months before a spot opens up again. I let silence fill the line. Let him hear what he thought was an old man processing bad news. Let him hear hesitation that sounded like weakness. Okay, I said finally. Do what you need to do. You're sure? His voice had a edge now. Sharp. Testing. Because last time you seemed, I don't know, uncomfortable. I'm sure. She's our mother. Her care comes first. Relief in his exhale. You're a good brother, Nate. I mean that. A lot of guys wouldn't understand. Wouldn't prioritize family like this. The line went dead. I set the phone back in its cradle. Opened my laptop. Waited. At 11:43 the transaction posted. $23,000. Joint account to Darren Holloway personal. I took a screenshot. Opened my spreadsheet. New row. Date. Amount. Category, fraudulent transfer. Notes, claimed intensive monitoring upgrade, false emergency tactics, high-pressure timeline manipulation. I saved the file. Then I called Riverside Memory Care. The receptionist transferred me to Patricia Vance. Mr. Holloway, she said. Her voice had that professional warmth that care facility administrators cultivated. "How can I help you today?" "I'm calling about my mother, Eleanor Holloway. I understand there's been a change in her condition. A need for intensive monitoring." Silence. Not long but noticeable. "I'm sorry, Mr. Holloway, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Your mother's condition has been stable for the past month. No changes to her care plan. No discussions about intensive monitoring. She's doing quite well actually." "I see." My voice stayed level. "Come. May have been some confusion on my end. Is there any way I could get a copy of her current care plan and billing statement? For my records?" "Of course. I can email that to you this afternoon. Should I send it to the address we have on file?" "Yes, that would be perfect. Thank you." I hung up. The billing statement arrived at 2:34 in the afternoon. PDF attachment. 12 pages. Detailed breakdown of every charge for the past 14 months. Monthly base rate, $8,400. Medication costs averaging $215 per month. Incidental supplies averaging $43 per month. Total. No emergency charges. No equipment upgrades. No intensive monitoring fees. No safety installations. No therapy programs. No legal consultations. Every single expense Darren had claimed was fiction. I printed the statement. 23 pages. Added it to the physical file in the banker's box at home. The file was getting thick now. Satisfyingly thick. The weight of it felt right. Felt complete. 3 weeks passed. October bled into November. The leaves on the trees outside the office turned yellow, then brown, then fell. The temperature dropped. I started wearing my winter jacket, the Columbia puffer I'd bought on clearance 6 years ago. The zipper stuck sometimes, but it kept me warm. Darren called again. Tuesday morning. 9:51. "Nate, we have a problem. Mom's estate attorney called. Remember Greenberg? He says there are some legal filings we need to handle for her conservatorship. Updates to her trust documents. It's complicated legal stuff. $29,000 in fees." "How much?" I said. Let my voice crack slightly on the second word. Like the amount had hit me. Like I was struggling. 29,000. I know it sounds like a lot, but Greenberg says it's necessary. Protects her assets. Protects us too when she eventually, when the time comes. "I can't keep doing this," I said. Let the words come out weak. Strained. Every month it's something else. I don't know if there's enough left. There's enough. Trust me. And this is important. This is legal protection. You want the estate tied up in probate hell when she passes. You want lawyers taking everything. No, I said quietly. No, I don't want that. Then approve the transfer. I'll handle Greenberg directly. You don't even have to think about it. I let silence stretch again. Let him think I was weighing it. Let him think he was convincing me. Okay. Do it. The transfer posted at 1:15. $29,000. I documented it. Then I called Martin Greenberg. Law offices of Greenberg and Associates. Estate planning attorney who'd handled Mom's will and trust setup back in 2018. Receptionist transferred me. "Mr. Holloway," Greenberg's voice. Deep. Professorial. "Haven't heard from you in quite some time. How's your mother?" "I'm calling about the conservatorship filing. The trust document updates. My brother mentioned you'd contacted him about fees." There was a pause. A long one. "Mr. Holloway, I haven't contacted anyone regarding your mother's estate. Her documents were finalized years ago. There are no pending filings. No fees outstanding. The trust is in perfect order." "I understand. Thank you for clarifying. If you do hear from my brother, I'd appreciate if you'd let me know." "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine. Just verifying some information. We ended the call. I added a note to the spreadsheet. Contacted Attorney Greenberg, confirmed 0 outstanding fees, confirmed no trust document updates required, confirmed Darren fabricated entire legal consultation claim. The lies were getting lazy now. He wasn't even trying to make them plausible. He was just inventing emergencies and assuming I'd roll over. He was right. I kept rolling over. But I was rolling over onto recording devices. By late November the account balance was down to $2,916.22. Darren had taken $177,400 from an account that started with $180,000. He drained 98.5% of our mother's care fund. And he thought I hadn't noticed. Friday afternoon, first week of December, Linda from Accounts Receivable stopped by my cubicle. Her face had that uncomfortable expression people get when they have to tell you something unpleasant. "Nate, I need to let you know something. Your brother was here again." "What do you mean here?" "Here at the office. Yesterday afternoon around 3. He came to the front desk asking for you. Patricia told him you were in a meeting. He waited in the lobby for 20 minutes. Was asking Patricia questions about you. About how you seemed lately. Whether you'd been stressed. Patricia told me this morning. She thought you should know." I kept my face neutral. Did he say what he wanted? Just that it was family business. That he needed to talk to you about your mother. But Nate, Linda hesitated. He was talking pretty loud. Saying some things. Things I don't think he should have been saying in a public space. What kind of things? She looked down. Looked back up. He told Patricia you'd been difficult about your mother's care. That you were being selfish with the account. That you were making it hard for him to get her the treatment she needed. He said you'd always been, and I'm quoting here, tight with money. That you didn't understand how expensive quality care was. My hands were flat on my desk. Palms down. I could feel the laminate surface. Cool. Smooth. Artificial. Thank you for telling me. It's okay. I know family stuff is complicated. Linda walked away. I sat very still. Darren had come to my workplace. Had waited in the lobby. Had told the receptionist, a woman I'd known for 16 years, that I was selfish. That I was difficult. That I was the problem. He'd tried to poison my reputation. Tried to control the narrative before I could. Tried to make me look like the villain in a story where he was the thief. It was the stupidest move he could have made. Because now there was a witness. A credible third party who could testify that Darren had demonstrated consciousness of guilt. That he'd tried to preemptively discredit me. That he knew what he was doing was wrong and was trying to get ahead of exposure. I opened my email. Typed a message to Patricia at reception. "Patricia, I understand my brother Darren visited yesterday. I want to make clear that he is not authorized to access this building or to discuss my personal business with staff. If he returns, please do not allow him entry and notify security. This is a personal boundary issue unrelated to work. Thank you for your professionalism." I hit send. Then I opened a new document. Typed up exactly what Linda had told me. Word for word. Saved it with a timestamp. Witness statement, Linda Ramirez, December 1, 2023. Added it to the evidence folder. Darren had crossed a line. He'd moved from private theft to public manipulation. He'd created witnesses. He'd created a timeline. He'd shown that he knew his actions required defensive positioning. In legal terms, he'd demonstrated guilty knowledge. In practical terms, he'd handed me the last piece of evidence I needed. I pulled up the FinCEN form on my laptop. Read through it again. Every field still accurate. Every attachment still current. I opened a new browser tab. Searched for FBI field office locations. Found the address for the Financial Crimes Unit. Federal Building downtown. 3rd floor. Hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. I could go Monday. Could walk in during lunch break. Could hand them the file and trigger the investigation. But I wanted one more thing. I wanted him to drain the account completely. Wanted him to take that last $2,916. Wanted him to demonstrate that he intended to take everything. That there was no bottom. No limit. No shame. So I waited. The weekend passed. Saturday I did laundry at the coin-op 2 blocks from my apartment. $2.75 per load. Washer ate my quarters but didn't start. I had to get the attendant to refund me. Load my clothes into a different machine. Small frustration. Meaningless. Sunday I drove to the grocery store. Bought food for the week. $93. Chicken breast. Rice. Frozen vegetables. Coffee. The basics. Drove home. Put everything away. Sat on my couch and watched nothing on television. Monday morning Darren called. 8:42. Earlier than usual. Nate, we need to drain the rest of the account. Not we need to transfer funds or the facility needs payment. We need to drain the account. The mask was off now. What do you mean drain it? I said. There's barely anything left. Exactly. There's about $3,000 sitting there. No point leaving it. I'm going to move it to my account for safekeeping. We can use it for Mom's incidentals. I sat at my kitchen table. Coffee going cold in my mug. The sun coming through the window at an angle that made the dust motes visible. What about her care payments next month? Already handled. I set up a new system. Don't worry about it. You're taking the last of it. My voice small now. Defeated. Broken. The performance almost perfect. It's fine, Nate. It's fine. This is better. Cleaner. You don't have to stress about the account anymore. I'll handle everything from here. The call ended. 37 seconds past 9 the transfer posted. $2,916.22. Joint account balance, $0.00. Account empty. Mother's Care Fund, completely drained. I took the final screenshot. Updated the spreadsheet one last time. Total theft, $180,000.00. 100% of the account. Not a penny left. I saved the file. Backed it up. Closed the laptop. My chest felt tight but not from anger. From anticipation. From the feeling you get when you've assembled something complex and you're about to test whether it works. I stood up. Got dressed. Put on my khakis and my button-down shirt and my winter jacket with the sticky zipper. Put my laptop in my canvas bag. Drove to work. Parked in slot 87. Walked into the building. Told my supervisor I needed to take a long lunch for a personal appointment. Drove downtown to the Federal Building. 3rd floor. FBI Financial Crimes Unit. Walked in carrying my canvas bag with the laptop and the banker's box with the physical files. A receptionist at a desk behind security glass looked up. Can I help you? I need to report a financial crime. Elder exploitation. I have documentation. She picked up a phone. Spoke quietly. Hung up. Someone will be with you in a moment. Please have a seat. I sat in a plastic chair bolted to the floor. The waiting area smelled like floor cleaner and recycled air. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. 15 minutes passed. A door opened. A man in a gray suit. Mid-40s. Tired eyes that had seen too many cases. Special Agent Morrison. He looked at me. Looked at the banker's box. You're here about elder exploitation. Yes. My brother has been systematically stealing from a joint account meant for our mother's care. I've documented everything. Morrison's eyes shifted to the box again. How much documentation? 78 pages of evidence. 6 months of transactions. Recorded phone calls. Witness statements. Cross-referenced billing records. I work in regulatory compliance. I know what prosecutors need. His expression changed. Not much. Just a slight tightening around the eyes that meant I'd said something that caught his attention. "Come with me." I followed him through the door. Down a hallway. Into a conference room with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. "Sit," he said. "Let me see what you have." I opened the banker's box. Pulled out the files. Laid them on the table in order. Transaction log. Bank statements. Recorded phone conversations. Facility billing records. Witness statements. Timeline analysis. Legal statute summary. Morrison started reading. His expression stayed neutral, but he was reading carefully. Flipping back to cross-reference. Checking dates. After 20 minutes he looked up. "This is extremely thorough. I've been building it for 6 months. Letting him establish a pattern. Letting him take enough that the case is undeniable." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Why did you wait so long? If you knew 6 months ago." "Because 1 or 2 transactions could be argued as misunderstanding. 6 months of systematic theft with escalating amounts and documented false claims eliminates any defense of good faith. I needed irrefutable evidence." He almost smiled. "You would have made a good prosecutor. Can you come back Thursday? I'll have an assistant U.S. attorney review this. We'll need your formal statement. Thursday at 9. I'll be here." I left the federal building. Drove back to work. Finished my shift processing compliance reports. Drove home. Made dinner. Ate it. Washed the dish. Sat on my couch in the quiet apartment. My phone buzzed. Text from Darren. "Just wanted to say thanks for being reasonable about everything. Mom's lucky to have sons who can work together. Know this hasn't been easy for you. I appreciate you trusting me to handle things." I stared at the message. Read it 3 times. The audacity of it. The shamelessness. I didn't respond. I turned off my phone. Went to bed. Lay in the dark. Thought about nothing. Thursday would come. The system would activate. Justice wasn't an emotion. It was a process. And the process was about to execute its function. Thursday morning at 9 I sat in the same conference room at the federal building. Special Agent Morrison was there. Next to him sat a woman in a charcoal suit, blonde hair pulled back tight enough to make her temples look stretched. She had the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile from seeing too many financial crimes. Assistant U.S. Attorney Catherine Price. She'd been reading my file for 3 days according to Morrison. Now she sat across from me with 78 pages of evidence spread in front of her like cards in a high-stakes game she already knew how to win. "Mr. Holloway," she said. Her voice was sharp. Precise. The voice of someone who didn't waste words. "This is one of the most well-documented elder financial exploitation cases I've seen in my career. You've essentially built our entire prosecution file." "When will you move?" I asked. My voice flat. No inflection. No emotion. Just the question. "Today. We'll freeze the joint account immediately. Not that there's anything left to freeze, but we'll freeze it anyway. Prevents him from claiming he intended to restore funds. We'll execute seizure warrants on your brother's personal accounts, his business accounts, any assets we can identify. Given the systematic nature of the fraud and the amount involved, we're looking at federal charges. Wire fraud. Elder financial exploitation. Theft by deception." Morrison leaned forward. "I need to ask, why didn't you stop him earlier? You clearly knew what he was doing after the first or second transaction." I needed irrefutable evidence. If I'd confronted him early, he could claim misunderstanding. Confusion about what the account was for. By letting him establish a pattern over 6 months, by documenting his false claims and cross-referencing them with facility records, I eliminated any possible defense. This wasn't confusion. This was systematic, calculated theft. Catherine Price made a note on a legal pad. "You would have made a good prosecutor," she said. Morrison had said the same thing. I didn't respond. "What's his exposure?" I asked. "Sentencing range. Best case if he pleads guilty immediately, 3 to 5 years federal prison. If he fights it and loses at trial, 8 to 12. We'll also pursue full restitution and asset forfeiture to recover what he spent. Do you have any contact with your brother currently? He texts occasionally. Calls sometimes. I have recordings of most conversations. I haven't responded to anything in the past week. Good. Keep it that way. Don't discuss this with him. Don't warn him. Let us execute the warrants clean. When he contacts you after we move, and he will contact you, do not engage. Refer him to us. Understood. I left the federal building at 10:37. Drove back to work. My hands were steady on the wheel. My breathing was even. The tightness in my chest had loosened. Not gone, but manageable. Reduced from a clenched fist to a closed hand. At my desk I opened the compliance report I'd been working on for 2 weeks. Section 9, Contractor Billing Discrepancies. Read through my notes. Made edits. The work was mechanical. Soothing. I understood systems. I understood audits. I understood the satisfaction of finding errors and documenting them and watching the correction process unfold exactly as designed. This was that. Just larger scale. At 2:15 my phone rang. Desk phone. I picked it up expecting a coworker. It was Darren. His voice had a quality I'd never heard before. Hi. Thin. Panicked. What the fuck did you do? I said nothing. The silence on my end was complete. What did you do, Nate? The FBI came to my office. They had warrants. They froze my accounts. My business accounts. Everything. They're saying I stole from Mom. They're saying you filed a complaint. They're saying I'm looking at federal charges. Tell me this is a mistake. Tell me you didn't do this. I kept the phone to my ear but I didn't speak. I let him hear nothing. Let him hear the void he'd created. Nate. Say something. His voice cracking now. We can fix this. This is a misunderstanding. I can explain. I can show them the facility invoices. I can prove the money went to Mom's care. We can make this right. You just need to call them. Tell them you made a mistake. Tell them you were confused about the transactions. I hung up. Set the phone gently back in its cradle. Stared at my computer screen. The compliance report blurred slightly. My vision doing that thing where your eyes are focused on something closer than the screen. Something internal. 10 minutes later my phone buzzed. Text message. Darren. Please call me back. This is serious. They're talking about prison. I have a family. I have kids. You're going to let them destroy my life over a misunderstanding about Mom's account. Call me. I deleted the text. Turned my phone face down on the desk. At 4:47 Catherine Price called. We've recovered $164,000 from your brother's accounts. The remaining $16,000 was spent. We're pursuing asset forfeiture on his vehicle, some electronics, other property. Your mother's care account will be restored. We're filing charges this afternoon. Wire fraud, elder financial exploitation, theft from a joint account holder through fraudulent misrepresentation. He'll be arraigned Monday morning. What happens now? I asked. Now he gets a lawyer. The lawyer tries to negotiate. We don't negotiate on cases this clear. He pleads guilty or we go to trial. Either way he's going to prison. The only question is how long. Has he tried to contact you? Yes. I didn't respond. Good. Keep it that way. Thank you, I said. She hung up. I sat at my desk until 5:30. The office emptied around me. People saying good night. Have a good weekend. See you Monday. I responded with nods. With small waves. With the appropriate social gestures. At 5:35 I packed my laptop into my canvas bag. Walked out to the parking lot. The sun was setting. Orange and cold. The temperature had dropped to maybe 35 degrees. I could see my breath. My car was where I'd left it. Slot 87. I got in. Started the engine. Let it warm up for 2 minutes while I sat with my hands on the wheel feeling the vinyl texture under my palms. Drove home. The route was automatic. I didn't think about the turns. My brain navigated while my conscious mind was elsewhere. Reviewing. Analyzing. Confirming that every step had been executed correctly. At my apartment I climbed the metal stairs. Unlocked my door. Inside was dark. I flipped the light switch. The overhead fixture buzzed for a second before the bulb caught. I dropped my bag on the folding table. Walked to the kitchen. Opened the refrigerator. Stared at the contents without seeing them. Closed it. Walked to the bathroom. Ran water in the sink. Cold first then hot. Waited for the hot water to arrive through the old pipes. Took maybe 45 seconds. Splashed my face. The water was almost too hot. Almost but not quite. I dried my face with a hand towel that had gone stiff from too many washes without fabric softener. Looked at myself in the mirror. Same face as this morning. Same face as yesterday. But something in the eyes was different. Not harder. Not colder. Just clearer. Like a window that had been cleaned. I walked back to the living room. Sat on the couch. Turned on the television. Found a news channel. Didn't watch it. Just let the sound fill the space. My phone rang. I looked at the screen. Darren again. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. Waited. The voicemail notification appeared. I played it on speaker. Nate, please. His voice was different now. Not angry. Not demanding. Begging. I need you to understand. I was trying to help. The facility, they kept asking for more money. I thought you wouldn't understand. I thought you'd say no. So I just handled it myself. I know I should have been more transparent. I know I should have shown you the invoices. But I wasn't stealing. I was helping Mom. You have to believe me. Please call Catherine Price. Please tell her this was a misunderstanding. Tell her I was just trying to protect Mom. They're saying I could get 12 years. 12 years, Nate. My kids will be grown. My wife is talking about divorce. My business is finished. Everything I built is gone. And for what? For trying to take care of our mother. Please. I'm your brother. I'm begging you. Call them. Fix this. The message ended. I deleted it. Sat in the silence. The television was still on but I'd stopped hearing it. The refrigerator hummed. The couple below me was arguing again. Muffled voices through the floor. One voice loud. One voice quiet. A pattern I recognized. Friday morning I woke at 6:13. My alarm was set for 6:30 but I was awake before it. Lay in bed staring at the water stain on the ceiling. The kidney-shaped one I'd memorized. Got up. Made coffee. Drank it standing at the kitchen counter looking out the window at the parking lot. The day was gray. Overcast. Temperature maybe 30 degrees. At work Patricia at the front desk looked at me differently. Not obviously. Just a slight change in her expression. Like she knew something had happened but didn't know what. Linda from accounts receivable stopped by my cubicle at 10:15. Nate, are you okay? I heard, she paused. I heard there might be some family issues. I'm fine, I said. Thank you for asking. If you need anything. I won't, but thank you. She walked away. At 11:43 my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Did, Mr. Holloway, this is David Chen. I'm an attorney. I represent your brother Darren. He's asked me to reach out to you regarding the federal charges. I have nothing to say to you, I said. Mr. Holloway, I understand there's been a family conflict. But this situation can be resolved through mediation. Your brother is willing to make full restitution. He's willing to admit fault. But the federal charges will destroy his life. If you could speak with the prosecutor. If you could clarify that this was a family misunderstanding rather than criminal theft. Tell your client to discuss resolution with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I'm not part of this anymore. He's your brother. Family. He stopped being my brother when he stole our mother's care money. Tell him not to contact me again. I hung up. Blocked the number. At lunch I drove to a sandwich shop 3 blocks from the office. Ordered a turkey sandwich on wheat. $6.75. Ate half of it. Threw the rest away. My appetite was gone. Not from stress. From completion. The feeling you get when a project is finished and your body doesn't need fuel for it anymore. Saturday I did nothing. Stayed in my apartment. Watched television. Didn't watch television. Existed in the space. Sunday I drove to Riverside Memory Care. Visiting hours 2 to 4. I signed in at the front desk. The receptionist smiled at me the way they all did. Sympathetic. Professional. Practiced. I walked down the hallway to room 34. The smell was the same as always. Disinfectant trying to cover the smell of age and decline. My mother was in her chair by the window. Staring at nothing. The television was on but she wasn't watching it. Her hands were folded in her lap. Thin hands. Spotted with age. Fingernails trimmed short by staff because she couldn't do it herself anymore. "Hi, Mom," I said. She looked at me. Her eyes took a moment to focus. Then something like recognition. Maybe. Hard to tell. I sat in the chair next to her. We sat for 40 minutes. I didn't try to talk much. She couldn't follow conversation anymore. Couldn't hold a thought for more than a few seconds. But I sat with her. Held her hand. Let her know someone was there. At 3:45 a care assistant came in. Medication time. I stood. Kissed my mother's forehead. Her skin was cool and papery. Drove home. That night Darren called 6 times. Left 4 voicemails. I didn't listen to any of them. Deleted them all. Blocked his number. Monday morning Catherine Price called. "Your brother was arraigned this morning. He pleaded not guilty. His attorney is already trying to negotiate but we're not interested. The evidence is too strong. We're proceeding to trial unless he changes his plea." How long until trial? 4 to 6 months typically. But I expect he'll plead out within 60 days once his attorney explains his chances at trial. Which are 0. We have recorded phone calls where he fabricates emergencies. We have facility records showing no charges. We have your documentation showing systematic theft. We have witness statements about his attempts at narrative control. No jury will believe this was a misunderstanding. I expect he'll plead guilty and will recommend the low end of the sentencing range. 3 to 4 years. Full restitution. Supervised release. Thank you for the update. Mr. Holloway, I want you to know, cases like this, they're hard on families. You did the right thing. Your mother's care is protected now. Your brother can't hurt her anymore. I understand. We ended the call. I sat at my desk. Opened my compliance report. Finished section 9. Started section 10. The work was clean. Methodical. Satisfying. At 2:38 my desk phone rang. I picked up without checking the caller ID. Thought it might be Catherine Price with an update. It was Darren. I don't know how he got through to my direct line. Maybe he'd saved the number years ago. "Nate, don't hang up. Please. Just listen." His voice was destroyed. Raw. Like he'd been screaming or crying or both. "I'm done. I'm finished. My lawyer says I'm going to prison no matter what. My wife filed for divorce. My dealership is being liquidated. The bank is foreclosing on my house. Everything is gone. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted?" I didn't respond. Didn't hang up. Just held the phone and let him talk. 20 years, Nate. We were brothers for 20 years before this. Remember when we were kids? Remember when we built that treehouse in the backyard? Remember when Dad died and we promised to take care of each other? That meant something. That should still mean something. You're really going to let them put me in prison? You're really going to destroy my entire life over money? Over some account that was just sitting there anyway. Mom doesn't even know where she is anymore. She doesn't know who we are. That money wasn't helping her. It was just sitting there. I was going to use it for something useful. For my kids' education. For my business. For things that mattered. But you couldn't let that happen. You had to be righteous. You had to be the good son. You had to punish me. Well, congratulations. You win. You get to be the hero. And I get to rot in prison while my family falls apart. I hope it was worth it. I hung up. Blocked the extension he'd called from. Sat at my desk. My hands were flat on the surface. Palms down. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. Slow. Steady. Even. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not guilt. Not anger. Just the quiet emptiness of a job completed. A system restored to its intended function. A malfunction corrected. At 5:30 I packed my laptop. Drove home. Made dinner. Chicken breast. Rice. Frozen broccoli. Ate it at my folding table while reading a paperback I'd bought at a used bookstore 3 months ago. Mystery novel. Decent writing. Predictable plot. At 8:15 I brushed my teeth. Got in bed. Lay in the dark. Tomorrow the sun would rise. I'd go to work. I'd process compliance reports. I'd be quiet Nate in cubicle 14B. And somewhere my brother would be meeting with his lawyer. Learning exactly how thorough my documentation had been. Learning that there was no defense. No escape. Learning that silence was never weakness. It was strategy. And strategy, when executed correctly, was absolute. 3 weeks after the arraignment, Darren's lawyer called again. Different tone this time. Not negotiating. Not pleading. Resigned. Mr. Holloway, this is David Chen. I need to inform you that your brother has decided to accept a plea agreement. He'll be pleading guilty to 1 count of wire fraud and 1 count of elder financial exploitation. Sentencing is scheduled for 6 weeks from today. The prosecution is recommending 4 years federal prison, full restitution of $164,000, and 3 years supervised release after his sentence. I wanted you to know in case you plan to attend the sentencing hearing. I won't be attending, I said. The lawyer paused. Your brother hoped you might be willing to provide a character statement. Something that might influence the judge toward the lower end of the sentencing range. No. Mr. Holloway, I understand there's been a breach of trust, but this is still your brother. 4 years is a long time. His children will be teenagers when he gets out. His marriage is already over. His business is gone. A word from you could make a difference. He had 6 months to make a different choice. He chose to steal. Now he faces the consequences. That's not cruelty. That's cause and effect. The lawyer said nothing for a moment. Then, I'll inform my client. The call ended. I went back to work. December passed. The office decorated for Christmas. Someone put up a small artificial tree in the break room. Green plastic branches with white LED lights. Linda organized a gift exchange. I participated. Drew Marcus's name. Bought him a coffee mug with some generic motivational quote. He seemed pleased. The holidays came. I spent Christmas alone in my apartment. Made a small turkey breast. Watched television. It was fine. Quiet. Exactly what I needed. New Year's passed the same way. No celebration. No resolution. Just the turn of the calendar from 2025 to 2026. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for January 14th. I didn't plan to go. Had no interest in watching Darren stand before a judge and beg for leniency he didn't deserve. But Catherine Price called me the week before. "Mr. Holloway, I wanted to let you know the hearing is next Tuesday. You're not required to attend, but you have the right to provide a victim impact statement if you choose." "I'm not the victim. My mother is." "Your mother is incapacitated. You're the family member who discovered the crime and reported it. The court considers you an impacted party. You can speak if you want." "I'll think about it." I didn't think about it. Decided immediately I wouldn't go. But Tuesday morning I woke at 5:43 and couldn't fall back asleep. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The kidney-shaped water stain. At 6:30 I got up. Made coffee. Stood at the kitchen window watching the sun come up gray and cold behind the apartment buildings across the parking lot. At 7:15 I called into work. Told my supervisor I needed a personal day. Sick time. He didn't ask questions. At 8:45 I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of the federal courthouse downtown. The building was concrete and glass. Brutal architecture from the 70s. All right angles and no warmth. I didn't get out of the car immediately. Sat with my hands on the wheel. The vinyl was cold. The heater was blowing but it hadn't caught up yet. My breath fogged the windshield. I wiped it with my sleeve. At 9 I got out. Walked across the parking lot. Through the main entrance. Security screening. Metal detector. Emptied my pockets into a plastic bin. Keys. Wallet. Phone. Belt. Walked through. Everything beeped clear. Collected my things. Took the elevator to the 4th floor. Courtroom C. The hallway outside was empty except for a few people sitting on benches. I recognized Darren's soon-to-be ex-wife. Sharon. Hadn't seen her in years. She looked thinner. Harder. Wore a black dress. Like she was attending a funeral. Maybe she was. Their 2 kids sat next to her. Boy and girl. Teenagers now. They didn't look at me. Sharon did. Her expression was pure hatred. Cold and focused. I didn't acknowledge her. Walked past and sat on a bench on the opposite side of the hall. At 9:20 the courtroom doors opened. A bailiff called the case number. United States versus Darren Michael Holloway. We filed in. Sharon and the kids sat in the front row on the right side. I sat in the back row on the left. The courtroom was wood and brass. Federal seal on the wall behind the judge's bench. Flags on either side. The room smelled like floor polish and old paper. Darren was already at the defense table with his lawyer. He wore a suit I'd never seen before. Dark gray. Probably bought specifically for this. His tie was straight for once. His hair was cut short. He looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. His shoulders curved forward like he was trying to make himself disappear. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The Honorable Margaret Feldman. 60-something. Silver hair. Reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Face that had seen 1,000 cases and wasn't impressed by any of them. Be seated. We sat. The bailiff read the charges. 1 count wire fraud. 1 count elder financial exploitation. The judge looked at Darren. "Mr. Holloway, you've entered into a plea agreement with the government. Do you understand the terms?" "Yes, Your Honor." Darren's voice was quiet. Barely audible. "And you're pleading guilty to both counts?" "Yes, Your Honor." The judge looked at Catherine Price. The government's position. "Your Honor, the defendant systematically defrauded his own mother over a 6-month period. He stole $180,000 intended for her medical care. He fabricated emergencies. He lied to family members. He demonstrated calculated, premeditated theft. We're recommending 4 years imprisonment, full restitution, and 3 years supervised release." The judge made notes. Looked at the defense attorney. Mr. Chen, does your client wish to make a statement? Yes, Your Honor. David Chen stood. Adjusted his tie. Your Honor, my client deeply regrets his actions. He was under significant financial pressure. His business was struggling. He made terrible decisions. But he wants the court to know he never intended to harm his mother. He believed, wrongly, that he could replace the funds before anyone noticed. He understands now the severity of what he did. He's lost everything. His marriage. His business. His relationship with his family. He's asking the court for mercy. For a sentence that allows him to eventually rebuild his life and have a relationship with his children. The judge looked at Darren. Mr. Holloway, stand. Darren stood. His hands were shaking. Is there anything you'd like to say? Yes, Your Honor. Darren cleared his throat. His voice cracked. I want to apologize. To my mother. To my brother. To my family. I made terrible mistakes. I was scared. I was desperate. I thought I could fix everything, but I just made it worse. I'm so sorry. I know sorry isn't enough, but it's all I have. Please, Your Honor, please consider my children. They need their father. I can be better. I will be better. I just need a chance. He sat down. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at her notes. Looked at Catherine Price. Does the victim's family wish to make a statement? Catherine Price looked back at me. Mr. Nate Holloway is present, Your Honor. The court recognizes his right to provide victim impact testimony if he chooses. The judge looked directly at me. Mr. Holloway, would you like to address the court? Every head in the courtroom turned. Sharon. The kids. Darren. His lawyer. Catherine Price. The bailiff. All eyes on me. I stood. My knees ached. My lower back was tight. I walked to the front of the courtroom. The bailiff directed me to a podium facing the judge. A microphone. Sat on top. State your name for the record. Nate Holloway. The defendant's brother. The judge nodded. Proceed. I looked at the microphone. At the judge. Not at Darren. Didn't need to see his face. Your Honor, I spent 32 years working in regulatory compliance. My job was to identify system failures. To document them. To recommend corrective action. That's what I did here. My brother wasn't desperate. He wasn't scared. He was opportunistic. He saw access to money and he took it. For 6 months he fabricated emergencies. He lied about our mother's care needs. He manipulated me using family obligation as leverage. He stole every penny of her care fund. When I documented his theft and reported it, he tried to discredit me. He came to my workplace and told my colleagues I was selfish. That I was the problem. He did that because he knew what he was doing was wrong and he was trying to control the narrative before I could expose him. This wasn't desperation. This was calculated theft. I paused. The courtroom was absolutely silent. The judge was watching me. Taking notes. I continued. My mother has dementia. She doesn't know where she is. She doesn't recognize her own sons most days. The money he stole was meant to keep her comfortable. To ensure she received care. He didn't care. He wanted a bigger house. A nicer car. Things that made him feel successful. He was willing to let our mother suffer for his comfort. That's not a mistake. That's not desperation. That's moral bankruptcy. I stopped. Looked at the judge. That's all I have to say. Thank you, Mr. Holloway. I walked back to my seat. Sat down. My heart was beating hard but my hands were steady. Darren was staring at me. I could feel it. I didn't look at him. The judge reviewed her notes. The silence stretched. Finally she looked up. Mr. Holloway, stand. Darren stood. His lawyer stood next to him. The court has reviewed the pre-sentencing report. The plea agreement. the evidence, and the statements provided today. This is a deeply troubling case. You exploited your position of trust. You stole from your own mother. You fabricated emergencies to justify your theft. And when confronted, you attempted to blame the person who discovered your crime. The government recommends 4 years. I find that recommendation appropriate. You are hereby sentenced to 48 months in federal prison. You will pay full restitution of $164,000. You will serve 3 years of supervised release following your incarceration. You are to report to the facility designated by the Bureau of Prisons within 30 days. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor. Darren's voice was almost inaudible. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Sharp crack that echoed. Darren slumped. His lawyer caught his elbow. Kept him upright. Sharon and the kids stood. Filed out. Sharon was crying. The kids looked numb. Darren turned and looked at me. Our eyes met. His face was destroyed. Red. Wet. Pleading. I stood. Walked out of the courtroom. Down the hall. To the elevator. Rode down to the first floor. Out through security. Across the parking lot to my car. Got in. Started the engine. Sat with my hands on the wheel. My chest felt hollow. Not empty. Hollow. Like a space that used to hold something and now held air. I drove home. 11 miles. Surface streets. The sun was trying to break through the clouds but not succeeding. Everything was gray. At my apartment I climbed the stairs. Unlocked the door. Inside was quiet. I dropped my keys on the folding table. Walked to the kitchen. Stood at the counter. Stared at nothing. My phone buzzed. Text message. Catherine Price. Sentencing completed. 4 years as recommended. Restitution order filed. Your mother's care account has been fully restored. Funds are secure. Thank you for your statement. It made a difference. I read it twice. Deleted it. Put the phone down. Walked to the bathroom. Ran. Water in the sink. Cold then hot. Waited for the hot to arrive. Splashed my face. The water was too hot. Burned slightly. I kept my hands under it until my skin turned red. Dried my face. Looked in the mirror. Same face as yesterday. Same face as this morning. But something behind the eyes had shifted. Not closure. Didn't believe in closure. Just completion. The system had processed the error. Had executed the correction protocol. Had restored function. I walked back to the living room. Sat on the couch. Turned on the television. Didn't watch it. Just sat. The refrigerator hummed. The couple below me was quiet for once. The building creaked. Outside a car alarm went off. Ran for 30 seconds. Stopped. I thought about Darren standing in that courtroom. His shaking hands. His broken voice. His plea for mercy. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No guilt. No anger. No sadness. Just the absence where those emotions should have been. He'd asked if I was happy. If destroying his life was worth it. Wrong question. This wasn't about happiness. Wasn't about revenge. Wasn't about punishment. It was about correction. About restoring a system to its intended function. About stopping a leak before the tank ran dry. He'd made choices. I documented them. The law had processed them. The outcome was inevitable from the moment he took the first dollar. Everything after that was just the machine working as designed. I sat on the couch until the light outside faded. Until the room was dark and I hadn't bothered to turn on a lamp. Until my phone buzzed again with messages I didn't read. Until my body told me it was time to move. I stood. Made dinner. Chicken breast. Rice. Broccoli. The same meal I made 3 times a week. Ate it at the folding table. Washed the dish. Dried it. Put it away. Brushed my teeth. Got in bed. Lay in the dark. Stared at the water stain on the ceiling. Tomorrow I'd go back to work. Process compliance reports. Be quiet, Nate, in cubicle 14B. Nobody would ask about today. Nobody would know where I'd been. Life would continue exactly as it had. Except my mother's care was secure. Except the theft had stopped. Except the system was functioning correctly again. That was enough. That was everything. I closed my eyes. Sleep came slowly. But it came. 3 months later the world looked different, but only because I was seeing it clearly for the first time in years. April. The trees outside my apartment building had started budding. Small green points pushing through bark that had looked dead all winter. I noticed them on my morning walk to the car. Noticed because I had time to notice. Had space in my head that wasn't occupied by monitoring spreadsheets and documenting theft. The space was still there but empty now. Clean. Darren was in federal prison in Pennsylvania. Minimum security facility but still prison. Concrete blocks. Chain link. Guards. I'd received one letter from him in March. Handwritten on lined paper. 3 pages of apology and justification and pleading. Asking me to write back. Asking me to visit. Asking me to help him appeal his sentence. I'd read it once. Put it in the recycling bin. Didn't respond. Sharon had taken the kids and moved to Ohio where her sister lived. The house in the suburbs had sold at foreclosure auction. The dealership was gone. Liquidated. Assets seized to pay restitution. Everything Darren had built or claimed to have built had dissolved. Turned out most of it was leveraged. Borrowed. Built on credit and the appearance of success rather than actual success. When the foundation collapsed, the whole structure came down. I'd paid nothing for that collapse. Hadn't hired a lawyer. Hadn't spent $1. Just documented what was already happening and let the appropriate agencies execute their function. The cost was his. The consequence was his. I'd simply stopped absorbing the damage. My life had changed in small ways. Good ways. The joint account had been restored and transferred entirely to a trust for Mom's care. $164,000. Managed by a court-appointed conservator. Untouchable. Protected. Mom would never know the money had been stolen. Would never know it had been recovered. Would never know her son was in prison. The dementia had progressed. She barely spoke now. But when I visited on Sundays, she would sometimes squeeze my hand. Some flicker of recognition or comfort or just human contact. I went every week. Sat with her for an hour. Held her hand. Let her know someone was there. The care facility staff knew me now. Smiled when I signed in. Asked how I was doing. I was doing fine. At work nothing changed and everything changed. I was still quiet Nate in cubicle 14B. Still processed compliance reports. Still documented discrepancies and filed reports and watched the correction process unfold. But people looked at me differently. Linda. Marcus. Sarah, whose last name I'd learned was Torres. Even Patricia at the front desk. They'd heard what happened. Not details but enough. Knew I'd reported my brother for fraud. Knew he'd gone to prison. Knew I'd done it alone and quietly and thoroughly. They treated me with a kind of cautious respect. Like they'd realized the quiet man wasn't quiet from weakness but from choice. I didn't explain. Didn't need to. I'd gotten a small raise in February. Merit increase. 3%. My supervisor had called me into his office and said I was one of the most reliable employees he'd ever managed. That my work was consistently excellent. That I was valued. The words meant less than the raise. $2,100 more per year. Not much but enough to matter. Enough to start saving. I'd opened a retirement account. Started contributing. Building something for myself finally. My apartment was still the same. Beige carpet. Water-stained ceiling. Folding table. Sagging couch. But I'd bought a new coffee maker in March. A simple drip machine. Black and stainless steel. $29 at Target. It made coffee that tasted better than the old one. Small upgrade, but it mattered. Every morning I made coffee in a machine I'd chosen. Drank it from a mug without cracks. Started the day with something that worked correctly. Small thing. Revolutionary thing. I'd thrown out the old cracked mug. Bought a set of 4 new ones. White ceramic. Heavy. Solid. They sat in my cabinet and used most of the time because I lived alone, but they were there. Available. Mine. I'd stopped eating frozen dinners every night. Started cooking actual meals. Nothing fancy but real food. Chicken breast. Vegetables. Rice. Sometimes pasta. I'd bought a decent knife. A cutting board. Basic kitchen tools. Spent maybe $80 total. The act of cooking was meditative. Chopping vegetables. Watching water boil. Timing things. Creating something functional and consuming it. Process and result. Cause and effect. I'd started sleeping better. The tightness in my chest had faded. The ache in my jaw was gone. My shoulders didn't feel like wire anymore. My body had stopped holding tension it didn't need. Stopped preparing for threats that had been eliminated. Saturday mornings I drove to a coffee shop near my apartment. Local place. Not a chain. They knew my order after 3 visits. Large black coffee. Nothing added. I'd sit by the window and read the newspaper. Physical paper. Not online. The texture of newsprint. The smell of ink. The act of turning pages. 40 minutes of sitting and reading and existing in public without purpose beyond being there. Sunday mornings I visited Mom. Sunday afternoons I did chores. Laundry. Grocery shopping. Cleaning. The routines of maintaining a life. Sunday evenings I sat on my couch and watched television or read a book or did nothing at all. The nothing felt different now. Not heavy. Not suffocating. Just quiet. The apartment was quiet. The building was quiet. My mind was quiet. I'd learned to distinguish between silence that came from suppression and silence that came from peace. This was peace. Last week Linda had invited me to a group dinner. Co-workers going out after work on Friday. Casual. No occasion. Just people eating together. I'd gone. Sat at a table with 6 others. Ordered a burger and fries. Listened to conversations about weekend plans and television shows and office gossip. Contributed occasionally. Mostly listened. At the end of the meal Linda had said she was glad I came. That I should come next time too. I'd said maybe. Might actually go. The old version of myself would have declined. Would have gone home to the empty apartment and eaten alone because that's what he did. Absorbed solitude like he absorbed everything else. But I was learning that being alone and being lonely were different things. I'd been lonely surrounded by family who used me. I was alone now but not lonely. Free. There was a difference. Friday afternoon I left work at 5:30. Drove home. Parked in my usual spot. Climbed the metal stairs. Unlocked my door. Inside smelled like the coffee I'd made that morning. I dropped my keys on the table. Walked to the kitchen. Opened the refrigerator. Pulled out chicken breast I'd bought Wednesday. Vegetables. Started cooking. While the food cooked I stood at the window looking out at the parking lot. The sun was setting. Orange light cutting through the buildings. Making everything look warmer than it was. My phone was on the counter. Face down. Silent. No missed calls. No urgent messages. No fabricated emergencies. Just a phone that rang when it needed to and stayed quiet when it didn't. The chicken finished. I plated it with rice and broccoli. Sat at the folding table. Ate slowly. Tasted the food. Let my mind wander without purpose or direction. After dinner I washed the dishes. Dried them. Put them away. Walked to the bathroom. Brushed my teeth. Came back to the living room. Sat on the couch. Turned on the television. Found a nature documentary. Watched it without really watching. Just let the images and narration fill the space. At 9:30 I turned off the television. Sat in the quiet. Thought about the past year. Thought about Darren in prison. About Mom in the facility. About the money restored. About the system that had functioned exactly as designed when given proper documentation. Thought about the version of myself who'd stood in the break room 6 months ago and let his brother steal $47,000 while co-workers watched. That person felt distant now. Like someone I used to know. Someone who'd believed that absorbing damage was the same as fixing problems. That silence was the same as peace. That family obligation meant accepting abuse. I'd learned different. Learned that boundaries weren't cruelty. That consequences weren't revenge. That protecting yourself wasn't selfish. That sometimes the most loving thing you could do was let someone face the results of their choices. Darren had called me selfish. Had said I'd destroyed his life over money. He was wrong. I'd stopped participating in my own destruction. That wasn't selfish. That was survival. The money wasn't the point. The point was that he'd believed he could take anything and I'd accept it. That my silence meant consent. That my competence meant I existed to serve him. He'd learned wrong. I stood from the couch. Walked to the bedroom. Got ready for bed. Lay down. Stared at the water stain on the ceiling. The kidney-shaped one I'd memorized over 9 years of living in this apartment. Tomorrow I might look into moving. Nothing urgent. But maybe time for an upgrade. A place without water stains. Without cracked linoleum. Without the weight of years spent making myself small to avoid conflict. Maybe a 2-bedroom. Not because I needed the space but because I could have it. Because I was building something now instead of giving everything away. Maybe. Or maybe I'd stay here. Didn't matter. The point was I had a choice. Had resources. Had a future that belonged to me. I closed my eyes. Sleep came easily. No tension. No jaw clenching. No racing thoughts. Just the slow descent into rest that came from a day lived correctly. A system functioning as intended. A life restored to proper operation. I'd spent 40 years being the person who fixed problems for everyone else. Spent 40 years being reliable and helpful and competent and taken for granted. Spent 40 years mistaking self-sacrifice for virtue. I was done with that. Done absorbing damage. Done being the resource everyone else consumed. I wasn't angry about it. Wasn't bitter. Just done. Some people thought that made me cold. Thought I should have forgiven Darren. Should have shown mercy. Should have prioritized family over justice. Those people didn't understand. Mercy without accountability wasn't mercy. It was enabling. It was teaching someone that actions had no consequences. That theft was acceptable if you apologized after. I'd shown Darren something more valuable than mercy. I'd shown him reality. Shown him that systems had rules. That violations had consequences. That silence didn't mean consent and patience didn't mean weakness. He'd learn that over the next 4 years. Learn it in a concrete cell with chain link and guards. Learn it the hard way because he'd refused to learn it any other way. I didn't feel good about it. Didn't feel bad about it. Just felt the quiet satisfaction of a correction executed properly. A malfunction eliminated. A system restored. Tomorrow the sun would rise. I'd make coffee in my $29 machine. I'd drink it from my uncracked mug. I'd drive to work and process compliance reports and be competent at my job because competence mattered when it served me instead of draining me. I'd come home and cook dinner and exist in my space and build my life piece by piece the way it should have been built all along. And if anyone ever tried to exploit my silence again. If anyone ever mistook my quietness for weakness. If anyone ever assumed my helpfulness meant they could take whatever they wanted. they'd learn the same lesson Darren learned. That the quiet man isn't defeated. He's documenting. And documentation, when complete, is absolute.